If we can call upon the Australian spirit of kindness and compassion, particularly men, don't check out, don't act out, check in. I think we are on a winner there, how we could really solve this. It's really enlightening to see that so many people want to do the right thing and want to step up and speak out.
That's Allan Ball. He's the National Director of White Ribbon Australia, part of a global movement to eradicate violence against women. Allan's got his own story of navigating trauma and tragedy, having lost his mother in a house fire when he was just a child.
That's a life-changing moment. That is something that no child, no individual should ever have to experience.
He's had a relish for social justice from a young age and now stands at the forefront of Australia's mission to stop one of our most devastating problems.
1 in 3 women have experienced some form of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, aged 15 years and above in Australia.
It's difficult to talk about domestic violence from a male perspective, but there's no doubt we as men need to be engaged in the conversation if things are going to get better. Welcome to Young Blood, the award-winning volunteer podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is a platform for everyday men to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the #1 killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This episode has been made possible by Pro Realty Property Consultants. Pro Realty is a proud sponsor of the Young Blood Men's Mental Health podcast and a big believer in the importance of mental health awareness and suicide prevention. These legends swooped in with funding support at a time when we really needed it, and it's thanks to them we've been able to keep the show going. If you're looking for a commercial real estate agency you can trust to deliver quality, Pro Realty has a team of experienced professionals with the knowledge and expertise to provide you with a wide range of specialist services. Get in touch with their friendly team today to discuss how they can best assist you and mention Young Blood in your inquiry for a discount. Trigger warning, if you find anything spoken about in this episode distressing, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. And if you or someone you know is being impacted by domestic violence, you can call 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732. Allan, can you start by telling us about your mum?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's I don't know much about my mum because she passed away when I was a young lad. But what I do know about her was that she was incredibly brave. She was a kind woman and she had her own struggles. She was dealing with drug addiction. And as a kid watching that, you don't know that. You just know it as mum being upset, sick, not there, a bit absent. But what I did have was a father that absolutely stepped up and stepped in where he needed to protect his children. And I think that's the very nature of love, right? Where you, as parents, you educate your kids through role modeling, and role modeling was around protection to ensure that we were not succumbed to those pressures, those insights, and that pain and that trauma. But when my mum passed away when I was 7 in a horrific accident, we had a house fire, and she perished in that house fire. That's a life-changing moment. That is something that no child, no individual should ever have to experience.
What do you remember from that time?
What do I remember? I remember missing the small things initially, so that I won't have roast dinner that she used to cook. I won't get a hug after school. She loved to play with balloon animals, like from the show or from the shopping mall. And I remember those things. But then as milestones hit in your life, so you graduated from school, you got married, you had a child, all of these milestones that I continue to have, you want to share that with the person that raised you, and you can't because they're not here. And when anyone talks about grief as something that kind of something you process and you move on, like I've heard these sayings before. I've never left this grief. The grief just sits with me like a dark passenger, and it is loud and it's quiet, but it never leaves.
How did you respond when you were a little kid?
I recall just there was a lot of missing, a lot of guilt as well, a lot of jealousy. So you'd see other kids with their mum and dads. I recall Mother's Day being tremendously hard. Like you would have these Mother's Day stalls at school, and the school wrapped our arms around my sister and I and would protect us in the initial years. But when you got to high school and you still had these exposures, and I guess at primary school, there's I think a greater sense of intimate community than there is at high school, because you're kind of learning to be an adolescent and you're formulating your identity, and there's lots of stuffs going on with puberty. But I recall at primary school, the school really wrapping our arms around us and protecting us as much as possible. But as a kid, it was jealousy, and then it was anger, and then there was acting out as well. And there was such confusion about not having a mum around, and you kind of felt really like a leper. And then you uncovered the information. So I think the best thing my dad and my grandma particularly, was shelter me and my sister from the information. And as adults, or we grew up in teenagers, we asked more questions. My sister and I, we got curious and inquisitive about what happened. And then you start to reveal the details when you can process it. And that in itself that's the revisiting of that trauma, because you want to make sense of it because you are curious. But as a child, it was just a real sense of just emptiness, and it completely rocked our world.
How did your dad handle it?
My dad is probably a quintessential Australian fella. He's stoic. He doesn't reveal his emotions too much, but I know he did what he needed to do to support the family, to support my sister and I, to ensure that we were sheltered from the trauma and pain. We received support through child adolescent mental health practitioners. He did what he needed to do. He stepped up, he stepped in, and my dad is a trailblazer in that regard. As adults, we've had conversations with him, and he was young himself. So he was still like, I'm now older than I was when my dad was when my mum passed away. And I think, gosh, if my partner was to pass away, I'd be distraught. I would be absolutely shattered. So I'm feeling that, and I've played that back to him as an adult, and he was feeling that. But he did such a beautiful job as a dad, and he really protected us from that emotions. I know that he had a really strong community around him, and I think that's essentially what got him through it. He had his friends, he had his family that he could lean on, and he did what he needed to do as a dad to protect his children.
To be going through that grief on one hand, but then also being relied on by children for everything. It just doesn't get much tougher than that, does it?
No, and I will always be grateful, and I will always be thankful for his gratitude, his love, his kindness and his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to put his needs last and put his children's needs first. He absolutely sacrificed, and he missed out. And when he then went through girlfriends, and he was dating again, and he found himself as this kind of mid-30s kind of guy, navigating the dating pool with 2 kids that were going through adolescence. And me and my sister were probably nasty to him as well, because we're acting out as you do as teenagers. It would have been so difficult, but yet I recall him just being so still and calm and always present, despite also working a few jobs at a time to keep the food on the table. I mean, he went from a dual income to a single income, mortgage, supporting his kids.
Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an adult now, like, we're adulting, and I find it difficult. Like,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, it's really interesting, kind of the things we do as adults, and then I could only imagine overlaying that with probably one of the most stressful, traumatic experiences: losing a house in a house fire, and also losing your love of your life, the person you married, the mother of your children. My dad is incredible how he dealt with that.
How's that tragedy defined you?
It's set me up for, before, when I was a kid, I was defined by it. As an adult, I'm not allowing it to define me. And that shift in narrative probably occurred late adolescence, when I was tired of being sorry and guilty and jealous. It's very exhausting to kind of compare yourself to others and experience what a normal should be, because what is normal? And that weight on my shoulders had compounded me to a point where I was really just struggling with a number of different things, whether or not it was schoolwork, physical activity, how I felt about myself, a lot of self-hate, negative self-talk. It was a real pressure. But what it's done effectively is it's gifted me with experience where I can empathize as a human and effectively do the job that I'm doing right now and have been doing. Yeah, I'm a trained clinical social worker. I've got postgraduate qualifications in management and human resourcing, and working with people, particularly the most vulnerable in society, requires an interpersonal effectiveness that's underpinned by the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think that's the gift out of all of this. And gift is a really strange word, but I mean it in a sense of how I had to reframe it as an adolescent, because otherwise I could have really struggled and continued to be defined by the tragedy, rather than reframe it to make it something that I saw as a gift and now I've got something to offer. That's how I had to reframe it. And that's how I got through it, really.
Have you gone through therapy to get to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think. It's so important to seek out support. I have mentors, informal and formal. I continue to do that now. Very open with my feelings, wear my heart on my sleeve. I talk about the bad times, the good times, and I have a really good, strong support, informal support network, and we have very candid conversations, intimate conversations, and I think that's essential.
Me too. Your grandma was a social justice warrior of sorts.
Oh, of course.
How's she influenced the man you are today?
My nan, who passed away during COVID, and she was the matriarch. And this is my father's, paternal grandmother, and this is my father's mother. She really stepped in when she had to take care of my sister and I, particularly as my dad had to go to work. So she took over the care and responsibilities. She also had a husband who had early onset Alzheimer's. So she was caring for a husband, and we watched my grandfather deteriorate during this same period of time, and watching my nan again step up and with stoicism. And so she had to advocate against some really horrendous aged care residential standards. We saw some of the conditions and squalor that my grandfather was dealing with, and my nan fought that system, fought for his right to have dignity and care, provided a voice to the voiceless, because dealing with Alzheimer's, he lost all his cognition and his ability to kind of have that sense of agency. He was dependent completely 24/7 on other people, including my grandmother, and she never left his side. So, and then she also raised 2 children, her grandchildren, and I had some of the best times with my nan. Some of the best memories I had with her, whether or not it was playing Avon, really embracing my femininity. I loved playing Avon with my nan with a catalogue. I loved playing Barbies, and my nan would encourage that. I loved cooking with her. I'm going on adventures with her. So she really shaped my sense of curiosity in the world, and unconsciously really was challenging gendered stereotypes. At the time, I did not see it as a problem to do the things that I was doing in terms of play and exploration. My nan absolutely fostered and encouraged that. She would have some very antiquated views, you would say right now. So some of her viewpoints were grounded in her trauma, being a World War II survivor. But she had an incredible life, and she died with such dignity. She died in her sleep at witching hour, 3 a.m. in the morning, and she slided off. And I think that's the best exit for a remarkable woman who lived an unremarkable life, but to me, she was extraordinary.
So you try to embody that spirit?
She is my spirit. Her DNA is my DNA. And if I could just live a life that my nan lived, even if it's just an inch of that, that's the best thing that I could do.
I'm sure she'd be very proud of you.
Ah, cheers, yes.
So National Director of White Ribbon Australia, big job. What does that entail?
It requires an unwavering commitment to men's involvement in and advocacy for women's safety. It's probably been one of the toughest jobs I've ever had in my life. Probably because I'm so compassionate by the issue and so passionate by it, but tough because being a gendered issue means that there's a lot of subjectivity and commentary. And this is probably the first time I'm talking publicly around it, but one thing that I find extraordinarily amazing about the position that I'm in is how I'm reminded about the human generosity, despite dealing with some of the most heinous, violent crimes and treatment of individuals. So men's violence against women is horrific. And I'm not talking just about murder, power and control. I'm just talking about general attitudes as well. It's horrific. I see some of the ugly side of Australian behaviours, but I also see, and more so, the genuine generosity and the commitment to want to do something differently. And that's the good news.
Generosity from who?
Generosity from people in Australia to want to give their time and their attention to address it in a realistic, pragmatic way. So whether or not that's been educated about the issue, a lot of people still don't know the stats, that 1 woman a week is murdered in Australia on average, or that 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse aged 15 years and above in Australia. That rape and sexual assault, whether or not you're a female victim, a male victim, a trans victim, 97% of sexual assault is committed by men. When people hear that, they're reminded about something that is not really spoken about. It's still taboo to talk about it. You overlay an intersectional lens with that as well, particularly looking at it from a multicultural perspective. And some communities don't talk about FDV. It's not safe, it's not comfortable, it's swept under the rug. And what my job is to really roll up that rug, lock it away, so we're not sweeping it under it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we can do about it, and particularly asking men to intervene in and advocate for women's safety. And I do that every single day, and I have amazing conversations with people like you, school children, men who are veterans and served our country. It's a generational lifespan issue, and it's really enlightening to see that so many people want to do the right thing and want to step up and speak out.
We all know physical health and mental health go hand in hand, and that's why Young Blood has partnered with Athletic Greens to bring you the benefits that can help with both. You might have heard of AG1, the one-stop shop nutritional drink packed full of everything you need to support your mind and body. Just 1 daily scoop of AG1 covers all your nutritional bases and supports long-term gut health with 75 vitamins, minerals, pre and probiotics, adaptogens, a greens blend, and whole food ingredients. Think of it like a cheat code to give you more energy, increase mental clarity, better sleep, and improve digestion, all while boosting your immune system. You wouldn't think mixing all those vitamins together would taste great, but AG1 is actually delicious and really simple to make part of your morning routine. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but producing the podcast is purely volunteer, and I actually have to pay for studio time and editing. Every dollar we make from this partnership will go towards helping to cover production costs. So it's an awesome way to support your health, help the podcast, and contribute to young men's mental health all in one. If you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/youngblood. That's athleticgreens.com/youngblood. Check it out. Those stats you mentioned there, they are shocking, of course, but in the past week, there's been a spike that goes even far beyond that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so what we're seeing right now is a spike in murders, particularly men murders of women. It happened just before Christmas in 2022. It happened, similar numbers were occurring at the start of 2022, and they were happening at the end of 2021. And during the COVID pandemic, there was also, during the height of it in 2020, there was this issue. So we are seeing a tremendous spike at the moment, but we also, in the last month, we've got some new data to indicate, particularly from the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, to indicate what the stats are telling us, and it paints a mixed picture. It still says it's a problem, but there is some hope on the horizon. We also have ANROS, which is the Australian Women's Safety Research Organisation. I probably messed up that acronym, so I do apologise to my ANROS colleagues, but they've just released the attitude survey, and one of the things that really speaks to me in that is the belief, a very strong belief still in the Australian community that people are holding the attitude that men's violence towards women or women's violence towards men is equal. And so that's a myth that we need to bust. It isn't equal. Women are disproportionately the victims. Doesn't mean that women don't perpetrate violence against men. It happens, but women are still disproportionately the victims.
It's also a bit of, I've found in my own experience that comment is something that men use to kind of disengage from the conversation immediately. Like as soon as we start hearing about how significantly men are the perpetrators of violence against women, we'll say, yeah, but men are also the victims. And that is valid, and we need to be able to acknowledge that too. But I think it's kind of used as a way of not talking about the rest of the issue, which is overwhelmingly the major part of the problem, and saying, okay, but men are victim too. Men are victim too. You know, we have to be able to accept that we're largely by a mile at fault for the violence that's being perpetrated and the incredibly destructive damage that's being done. And we have to be able to see that and see it as something that's tragic and be outraged by it, but we have to also want to be engaged and part of this conversation. And part of that is being brought into it without telling young boys and young men and men of all kinds, you're the problem. You know, you're someone who hasn't perpetrated violence yourself, but automatically because you're a man, it's your fault and you should feel guilty about it. Because as soon as that happens, it makes us want to pull back and say, well, I'm being blamed for something I haven't personally done, so I don't want to know about it. And I think, I don't know as well as you, but I think perhaps that a lot of men have felt like that over the time, and that's been part of the reason for brushing it under the rug or saying this is a women's issue, not a men's issue, is because as soon as you feel attacked, you want to go into yourself or push away from the issue and not be part of it. So big question, but how do we paint the seriousness of this issue, but in a way that brings men in, makes men want to be involved in the solution, without feeling like they have to carry some guilt for something that the vast majority of us haven't actually done ourselves.
And there is so much in that commentary, and I appreciate and thank you for sharing that, because you're playing back to us what mainstream Australia is kind of saying. First and foremost, I need to acknowledge the women survivors, the victim survivors. The reason I'm here and can be the national director of White Ribbon Australia is because women for many, many decades have screamed, have reached out, have been not believed, and continue not to be believed in some circles, but they've done the hard yards. And so I'm absolutely, I absolutely respect, and I wanted to acknowledge the women survivors. We need men at the moment to not feel shame. We've pointed the finger collectively as a society at men and said, you're right, you are the problem. And that is effectively true. I mean, we can't deny it, as you've said. But the way that we talk about it, we need to call men in. We need to make this an issue that they see that they can do something about. At the moment, there's really two things that men do, relatively. They act out or they check out, particularly of this issue. And we're asking men to check in. And that starts with education and starting to learn about the issue and about what their role is. And the collective bar for what it means to be a good bloke in Australia is set so low. It's I'm not violent, so therefore I'm one of the good guys. That's no longer the case. We need to raise that bar, and we can raise that together, because the silence and that complacency and not being able to call out a mate in a really respectful way around a sexist joke, sexist banter, a comment that he might make towards a woman or a girl, we're basically standing by them and saying that that's okay. And then that festers and grows. It's that kind of unspoken
Because it's the culture that underpins the behaviours that we see.
It is culture. It is culture. But then also we need men to be given some of the tools and resources to do this in a really meaningful way. White Ribbon Australia does provide those tools. We have a digital barbershop, which is a whole suite of resources that men can download right now for free, and they can understand around being a good father, understanding the toxic masculinity or being caught up in the man box, how to be a good upstander, which is calling out in a really respectful way. And it's very practical tools as well. And we're just facilitating some information around tech-based abuse, because we know people online are experiencing all types of issues. Revenge porn is one of the ones that comes to mind at the moment.
How do you get resources like that out to men without them coming to your website or having to try and find it themselves?
That's where White Ribbon does our best work. We know that men aren't going to come in. We have to go to them. And so it's a place-based assertive outreach model. And so that's why we have people on the ground, our community partners and our staff based right across Australia in every state and territory. And we mobilize this through really strong community networks, and we build a lot of relationships of trust. We also have to be really novel in the way we're doing our conversations. So we have something called the pop-up barbers. So we've had barbershops in Sydney, Southeast Queensland, up in Darwin. So men come in for a free haircut, and the only currency they have to pay is sitting there and understanding a little bit about the issue. They scan a QR code. You would appreciate it I know when I go into a barber, your guard is down. You're in that cape. I look in the mirror with that wet hair and I look like a lizard. I'm like, gosh, let me talk to the barber just to be distracted. So it's this really moment, and very few moments that men have where they can just engage with a complete stranger. And
it's also one of the most quintessentially masculine environments as well, like the barber.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched something unfold last year in November at Sydney Barbers with Zach. And he was having the most incredible conversations, because we train the barbers and then they go deliver the haircut and provide the resources. And it's not meant to be a therapeutic intervention. But for some of these men, there was a sense of like the seed had been planted and they wanted to question themselves. And we've even had a couple of men since going to a few of our barbershops reach out for positive help-seeking behaviors. Where could I go find some support? We don't anticipate that, but you just never know what happens when you plant the seed and information and what that means for a person, and particularly a man. And I work with men and boys all the time. We have a school program or a youth program, and we had 3,000 young people go through it last year in our pilot, and 870 odd young men provided a comment to us anonymously around what they took from it or what they are curious to learn a little bit more about. And what young men were particularly telling us was they have this overwhelming sense of confusion around what is their role. They feel, for some of them, they feel like they're missing out because of gender equity, that this focus on girls and STEM.
Coming at the expense of men.
Coming at the expense of young men particularly. So what is their role? How do they transition successfully from boyhood to manhood in this new masculinity archetype?
Who are their role models?
Who are their role models? How do they not swallow the red pill from Jordan Petersons and the Andrew Tates and the likes of those individual men in the world? So really struggling to navigate those dominant discourses. But when you boil that down, ultimately boys are hungry to get this right. They want some practical tools. They kind of get what respect and consent is about. They want some practical examples, and then they want that reinforced by multiple male role models.
Yeah, we like tools. We like to be able to take action.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're pragmatic, because boys get the seriousness of this issue. They honestly do. I would say I'm more hopeful probably of the newer generation coming through, just from my observations and what I'm reading in terms of the literature. Still a whole bunch of work that we need to do. We can't lose sight and repeat our messaging. It's the reinforcing that happens at home or in a community, at a music festival, in a sporting club, when we're out on a fishing trip or in the kitchen or a coffee shop, a barber shop. It's what's been reinforced in those environments where the work still needs to occur. And we're not asking men to give up anything in gender equality or gender equity. It's not a zero-sum proposition. What we're asking men particularly to do is be aware of our power and privilege, check into the conversation, and just collectively raise that bar of what it means to be a good bloke.
And masculinity is such a hot button topic and a really murky waters in lots of ways. What do you define as healthy masculinity? Can you define it?
So much literature around it. Toxic masculinity, healthy masculinity, postmodernist masculinity. It's such a buzzword. Masculinity for me is not being defined by a single archetype. And it's probably not the answer that it's probably the best, but for me, if I look at myself, I would say that I'm masculine, I'm feminine, I embrace all kinds of different notions of what it means to be a man, and I don't sign up to a single proposition. I'm also challenged in certain environments when I still catch myself when I go into the gym. I put on a certain persona. I walk like a pigeon, puff chest. My voice goes deeper because for some reason I have to be ultra masculine in that space. So silly, right?
Do you have to be though, or are you just
No,
telling
I
yourself
don't need
that?
to be. As a homosexual male, as a gay male, there is still this inadvertent fear that I will be have to explain or justify myself, or the guys might think I'm checking them out, and I'm always looking out to defend myself.
And how much is that true, and how much is that just a reflex?
I reckon it's a lot in my head. There's probably a lot there, but also a lot has been reinforced through media and through institutions.
And throughout earlier parts of your life, no doubt, as well.
Absolutely. And there is still a lot of homophobia that exists in our community. I mean, we're still having debates, really uncomfortable debates in our society about people in our rainbow community and about their role, what they can do, what they can't do, who they can be, which is really unfortunate. So this is justified, I feel. There's a lot of perception as well, but going back to that gym space as well, I do check on myself and I say, hey, Allan, what evidence do you have? It's this voice in my head that is the case right now.
You're an evidence guy.
I play the detective. And that's what we're asking particularly men to do. Just check your assumptions as well.
And what qualities is White Ribbon wanting to encourage in men? Like, what kind of men does White Ribbon want to see?
We want to see kindness and compassion for our fellow human beings and for ourselves as well. I recall this situation where I was in Darwin and I was in a pub, and there was this rowdy group of men and women having a very joyful time. And as you do, I'm drinking apple cider. I don't drink anything. Had to go to the toilet, and men's toilets, for those women listening, it's also a very unusual space. When you go to the urinal, it's head down, don't look to your sides, put those blinkers on. And I remember being there, and these two men were having absolute hysterical banter, and they were one of the men made a very, very abhorrent sexist joke around one of the women. And I recall to myself thinking, can I swear?
Yeah.
I was thinking, shit, I'm going to have to do something right now because that's my role. And as a man, I have to speak out when I see it. But I'm like, how am I going to do this? I'm at a urinal. Gosh, this is uncomfortable. And to my relief, his mate stepped up and spoke out, clipped him against the head and said, don't speak about her like that. It was pitch perfect, except maybe the clip of the ear. These men left. I followed them. I went up to them and I said, just then in the urinal. And then there was a bit of, what do you mean the urinal? Were you looking? And I said, no, I'm not picking you up. I'm happily married. And I played back to them what I observed. And I said to them, maybe next time, the middle ground is maybe not the clip of the ear. But it was just the language that he used, the trust he had in that mateship, and his mate not feeling shamed or guilty by it. He was like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. Like, you shouldn't speak like that. That's what we want in men. We want them to keep checking on themselves, checking on each other, challenging in a way that doesn't shame them, but calls them into it. We had a great night. The rest of the night, I ended up joining them. Didn't do the karaoke, but ended up joining them for the night. And I really recall that story because when you talk about what values we want in Australian men, kindness and compassion for our fellow friends and mates.
And I think that's such an important point because it doesn't have to come at the expense of other typically masculine traits that also are great and necessary for making a lot of competent men as well. So emotional intelligence is great, vulnerability is great, empathy is great, but so is strength, so is a proclivity to want to protect people, so is assertiveness to a degree. Like, these are all really great traits to embody, and it's important to tell men that it's not like you have to be all one way or the other, and that you should feel shame for the traits that you embody that are typically or traditionally masculine, and that you should only be more feminine and you should be more placid. There's a way of being both of those things and being good men who are also strong in a traditional sense, but able to be even more effective as men and better partners and better fathers and better community members, because you're also able to have that sense of empathy and compassion and be able to care for people and look after yourself better. And that means you're not acting out or checking out, and you are checking in. And like, it's really good to hear that that's what we're trying to encourage. And it's not about, this is a bit of an aggressive word, but like castrating men in a sense. I think on the extreme end, some men would feel like, I'm being told that I'm supposed to withdraw, and I'm supposed to be weak, and I'm not supposed to be a man. And that's not what we're saying.
Absolutely. And it comes back to choice or expectation. I mean, when we put expectations on people about how they should behave or define themselves, that's when problems exist. So we all have choices, and I think you've summed it up beautifully. Traits, characteristics, personas, personality, emotions, feelings. If it's a choice and you embrace it, and it's around kindness and compassion, there's no wrong thing. It's being a genuine human being that's connected to other human beings in a really respectful way.
There seems to be a strong polarity today between men and women, as well as between other groups, where it's men versus women, or it's women benefiting at the expense of men, or vice versa, and that push and pull against each other. And we're saying domestic violence is a men's issue, not a women's issue, but of course it's a men and women's issue, and it's about us actually coming together and seeing it that way, and with love and kindness trying to help each other through this, and not say men are the problem, or, oh, well, that's because women deserve it, or all this animosity. But how do men and women work together and come together with that love and compassion to actually make an impact and have us create a better world with less violence?
There is no simple solution, because domestic and family violence, or men's violence towards women, is really complex. And if there was a lever that we could pull and solve it, we would absolutely pull it by now. Ultimately, I go back to what White Ribbon stands for, and our commitment to ensuring that there is a sense of compassion, kindness, and empathy towards everybody. I mean, that's our values. And we are a part of a global movement. And one thing that really stands up for me is that in UK, they talk to their chaps. New Zealand, they talk to bros. We talk to Australian blokes. That's a quintessential Australian attitude. And I tap into that a lot, because one of the great things about being an Australian is our sense of mateship, and this real strong spirit that we come together at times of crises. And when we think about how we bounded together during COVID-19 and our responses to that, or our responses to natural disasters, floods, bushfires, avalanches, or the way that we come together in post-war or during war, there is this sense of mateship. I would love for us to tap into that same sense of mateship around the issue of men's violence against women. I'm unsure if it's because we're so desensitized to it that it's so common and normalized that we're not really paying attention to the crises that currently is unfolding in every neighborhood across Australia. Every postcode, it's not a poor issue or a rich issue or a white person's issue or an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander issue. It's a human issue. And Australian sense of mateship is something that I really urge Australians to call upon to address this. Because when we come together, we do some mighty good work. We should be really proud of how well we can collectively pull our resources and have done so through tremendous tragedy and come together as a one. There is a lot of still of bitterness, a lot of fighting, a lot of politics, particularly gender-based politics in this conversation. If we can dampen that down and just call upon the Australian spirit of kindness and compassion, particularly men, don't check out, don't act out, check in. I think we are on a winner there, how we could really solve this. But we want men particularly to be part of the generation that stops all forms of men's violence against women in Australia.
Well said. And that starts with being that person in your friendship group and being that person in your family or at work who calls that stuff out and doesn't proliferate it yourself.
Absolutely. We need to put that on a t-shirt.
It'd be a long t-shirt.
It'll be a long
Thanks,
t-shirt.
Alan.
Thanks, Callum. Yes.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Young Blood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Young Blood Mental Health on TikTok. And if you're already following, we'd love to get you more involved. Keep an eye out for our regular community question time posts on Instagram and drop a comment with your answers to join the conversation. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. Thanks to our local business supporters, Herd Financial. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.